Our annual village fair was always a magical place for me. But one year, I would witness some real magic. The fair wasn't as big as others, but to a kid like me, it didn't matter. A variety of stalls lined the road through our village. One of the local warehouses was refurbished as a festival hall, and the meadows were used for various activities. Many of the attractions were aimed at us kids, but I was more interested in the various stalls. Some sold candy and snacks, while others presented you with games, such as the lottery stall or the shooting range. The latter was always my favorite. It was awesome to use an air gun, and I often burnt through all my monthly allowance within a few short hours. I just finished another round against my best friend Johan when Martin showed up. Martin was our local troublemaker. He was a year older than us, and not exactly our friend. For some reason, though, he often hung out with us, if only to torment and annoy us. Well, you dorks win anything? I showed him a little keychain while Johan held up a pack of cards. The moment he saw our meager prizes, he burst into over-exaggerated laughter. It's not about winning prizes anyway. It's about the shooting, I brought out. Yeah, right, loser. Let me show you how it's done. With that, he stepped up to the stall, put down his money, and stared the owner dead in the eyes. What do I have to hit to win the big prize? The owner pointed at a little pyramid of metal cans. You'd have to shoot down all those cans, with 6 shots or fewer, he said. Heh, piece of cake, Martin said, grinning. The owner was quick to get the gun ready, handed it to Martin, and stepped aside. Martin put the gun against his shoulder, leaned forward and put on a serious expression, most likely trying to look like a badass. Then he began shooting. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't exactly good either. He hit 4 of his 6 shots, but at the end, more than a third of the pyramid remained standing. Well, too bad, young man, but you did pretty well for your age. Martin didn't reply. Instead, he turned around and began walking away. Thought you were going to show us how it's done, Johan teased him. Martin jerked around with an angry expression on his face. I was sure he'd hit Johan, but he shrugged. Guy's cheating. He glued the lower cans to the bottom, so there's no way I'd win. Let's see what else is around. Yeah, right, I whispered to Johan. He just can't admit that he sucks. What'd you say? He asked, turning around once more, staring right at me. Nothing, I brought out. It's just a stupid joke. He looked at me expectantly, and after a few seconds, I just told him the first joke that came to my mind. Once I was done, he looked at me for a few seconds more before he shook his head. Your jokes suck as much as your shooting, Muller. How can you suck so much at everything? I sighed, but said nothing. God, why do we have to run into him today? He could be so annoying. As he marched in front of us, looking for new victims for his overlarge ego, I poked Johan. He looked at me with an annoyed expression on his face, and was about to poke me back. I stopped him, and instead pointed to our right. I mouthed the words, "Let's get out of here," at him. Instead of nodding, as I'd expected, he just stared at me with a confused look on his face. I tried again, but once more he didn't get it. When I tried a third time, he cut me off. What the hell do you want, Stephen? Just say it, damn it. What are you two idiots doing back there? Martin called out and stepped up to us. I groaned. Right at that moment, I couldn't say who the worst of the two was. I don't know, he keeps doing stupid sign language stuff, Johan brought out. It wasn't sign language, you doofus. I was trying to... My voice trailed off when I saw a stall I hadn't noticed before. Just to our right, hidden behind a few others, stood a brightly decorated stall. It looked more like a tent, sprouting a multitude of colorful pendants and ribbons. Hey, what's that over there? Martin and Johann had been arguing if sign language was only used by deaf or mute people, but now they turned to where I was pointing. "Looks stupid. It's probably just like a fortune teller or something," Martin said. But I could see that even he looked slightly interested. Johann, however, seemed confused. "Wait, I was at that stall over there before. The one that sells candy? But that one wasn't there. It was like half an hour. Ow!" He turned to Martin, who'd slapped him across the back of the head. "What's that for?" "Talking nonsense. Stalls don't just appear out of nowhere." "But," Johann started, but Martin raised his hand again. I sighed as I watched their interaction. "Let's check it out," I finally said. And without waiting for them, I made my way to the stall. "Hey, Steven, wait! Ow! Cut it out, Martin!" Once I was closer, I couldn't help but stand there just staring at the strange stall. This was crazy. All those ribbons, pennants, and bows. All of them were so different, yet so detailed. One was shaped like a rose, while the one next to it was shaped like a jewel. Others looked like animals and creatures from mythology. It was a phantasmagoria of colors and shapes. The moment Johann reached me, he too marveled at the sight. Even Martin was quiet. "What do you think this is?" Martin asked eventually. "Probably a fortune teller, like you said," I answered. For a while longer, we just stood there, before we made our way to the entrance. The moment I touched the curtain to pull it aside, I looked up. I had thought it was cloth, but it felt different. As I crinkled it between my fingers, I realized what I was touching. Paper. I let go of it in an instant and stared at the small crinkle I'd caused. Then I carefully reached out for a ribbon. It, too, was made of paper. "What are you doing? Are you scared?" Martin called out from behind me. "It's all paper," I mumbled. He looked at me in confusion before he reached out and closed his hand around one of the many ribbons. What had been a cat became nothing but a crumpled up ball of paper. That's weird. By now, even Johann was holding a ribbon between his fingers. "Why don't you come in, young gentleman?" A voice echoed from inside the tent. I was so surprised I stumbled back a step and bumped right into Martin. He swiftly pushed me forward again. I tripped over my feet, stumbled right through the opening, and into the tent made of paper. When I got my bearings again, I found myself in a short, colorful corridor. After half a dozen meters, it opened up to a small room in which I saw a man standing behind a table. He was dressed as a magician, wearing weird, brightly colored clothing. As I stared at him, something seemed strange about his clothes, and I soon realized why. They, too, were made of paper. "Welcome, young gentleman. Might you be interested in some paper magic?" For a moment, I didn't move, but then I crossed the corridor and approached the man. Once I was inside the room, I couldn't help but look around. The entire room was decorated with paper crafts. Paper planes were dangling from the ceiling, and the walls were covered in magical creatures made of paper. Even the table the man was standing behind seemed to be made of nothing but paper. "Paper magic? Sounds boring," Martin announced once he joined me. A weary and quiet Johann followed him after a few moments. The man in front of us smiled, but replied nothing to Martin's condescending remark. "My young friends, paper magic is the greatest magic of them all, for paper can become anything you want it to." With that, he revealed a sheet of paper and a pair of scissors. He folded the paper a few times, and, with a few delicate snips, transformed it into a cut-out paper flower. "Holy shit, that's awesome!" Johann brought out, and I was quick to agree. Martin, however, wasn't impressed. "Yeah, that's nothing. We did that in first grade." He folded his arms over his chest, pushed his chin as high as possible, and tried to look down on the man in front of us. Of course. I wouldn't think I could impress you with just that. The man laughed. The flower vanished behind him, and he revealed a new sheet of paper. When I glanced at him, Martin was rolling his eyes. In front of me, the man was folding another sheet of paper, then plucking at it for a bit. Finally, the scissors flew over the paper again. He closed his hands before he raised them high, and threw whatever he'd created up into the air. In an instant, a plethora of tiny paper planes shot out from his hands and flew across the room. There were so many you felt like you were standing in the center of a mosquito swarm. While I stared at the tiny planes, trying to catch one of them, the man in front of us was already preparing his next trick. But of course, there's much more to paper, he brought out, while he worked meticulously and delicately at yet another sheet. Once he was done, he put his palms together. When he pulled them apart again, I saw a chain of tiny paper figures spread out between his hands. At first, I wasn't impressed. But a moment later, the tiny paper figurines began moving their tiny legs, as if they were walking. In wonder, both Johann and I leaned forward, staring at them with wide eyes. That's so cool. Can you teach me how to do this? I blurted out, without even thinking what I was saying. The man laughed. Well, young man, paper magic is not something that can be taught easily, he began, but was cut off when Martin stepped forward. You guys are such babies. It's a trick. I bet there are some invisible strings between his hands. There's no such thing as stupid paper magic. Oh, the man brought out. Well, maybe there is a way to prove that it is indeed real. His happy, cheerful smile had vanished, and was now replaced by an excited grin. Now, how about you write your name on this sheet of paper? He said, and presented Martin with a pen. Martin stared at him for a moment before he shrugged. This is gonna be so stupid, he mumbled before he put his name down. Now then, the man brought out, before he picked up the scissors again. After a few swift cuts, he'd created a little paper man, with Martin's name right in the center of his chest. Now, why don't you come forward and see if there's any tricks or cheats? Martin stepped forward, picked up the little paper man, held it up to his face, and turned it back and forth before he dropped it again. It's just a stupid cutout, he said, annoyed. But is it? The man picked up what Martin had called a stupid cutout, held it between his hands, and whispered something at it. Then he let go of it and let it fall back onto the table. Instead of falling down, though, the little paper man landed on his feet and remained standing upright. Martin took a step forward, and as he did, the little paper man did the same thing. When Martin leaned forward to look at it, so did the little paper man. And when Martin rose his hands to find the strings he thought were connected to it, the little paper man did the same. Whatever Martin did, the little paper man was copying all of his movements. It's another trick. There's gotta be strings here somewhere. His hands continued to move through the air hectically. Well, young man, do you have strings too? Suddenly, Martin froze. The only part of his body that moved were his eyes, which were wide and terrified. Then it happened. The little paper man took a step to the side, and so did Martin. The little paper man did a bow, and Martin followed suit. It was exactly the same as before, only in reverse. Now Martin had to repeat everything the little paper man did. Finally, Martin began freaking out. What's going on? How are you doing this? The man behind the table laughed. Oh, nothing much. Just a little trick. Using strings. With that, the little paper man broke into an embarrassing dance, which Martin had to repeat. Under normal circumstances, I'd have laughed, but I was terrified, as was Martin. "Now then," the man began, and picked up the scissors. "I wonder what would happen." All three of us watched, as the man brought the scissors closer and closer to one of the little man's arms, and began closing them. I could see Martin. He was out of it, desperately trying to move and run away, before he screamed in terror. And then, the man behind the table dropped the scissors. A moment later, the little paper man fell flat on the table, and Martin could move again. In an instant, he cringed back from the table, staring at the man with wide, terrified eyes. "What'd you do to me?" Martin called out, but only after he pushed himself behind me. "Oh, nothing but a little paper magic," the man said, laughing. "But I hope, young man, you now believe that paper magic is indeed real." Martin nodded vehemently. Yes, I believe you. Please, just let us go." "But of course. You're free to leave, young gentleman, unless you want to see a bit more of my paper magic." While Johann and I shook our heads, Martin had already turned around, and was on his way to the exit. As we followed him, I could see how furious he was. A mixture of anger and frustration distorted his face. I saw him blink away tears and heard him mumble to himself. The moment he'd made it to the exit, I saw Martin's eyes. They were wild, and a devilish grin appeared on his face. "See how he likes that." With that, he pulled out a lighter and brought the flame close to the walls of the corridor. Then he did the same with some decorations. In an instant, hungry flames licked over the paper walls of the corridor. Martin watched them for a moment before he turned to rush outside. Before he could, though, the paper in front of him moved, contorted itself, and the exit was gone in the blink of an eye. He began cursing and tearing at the paper, ripping it apart, only to find more and more paper behind it. Then, something began pushing itself upward from below him. Martin cringed and came to a halt a few steps in front of us. Mere moments later, the paper took on form. It was a figure. A brightly colored figure. And we suddenly found ourselves face to face with the man we just left standing behind the table. His face was angry now, and filled with rage. As he stared us down, more and more paper was added to his body, and he became taller, bigger, changing into an abomination made of paper. Johann and I were screaming, crying, huddling together, but Martin was frozen again. "Having doubts is only natural, but what you've just done is inexcusable," he bellowed at Martin. Johann and I wanted to run, to flee, but the surrounding flames were spreading higher and higher. In front of us, the paper monster reached out a long, dangling arm and opened its hand. On it stood the little paper man with Martin's name on it. A moment later, Johann and I watched in horror as the little paper man threw himself into the flames. It caught fire right away, grew dark, and eventually crumbled. Right at that moment, Martin began screaming. It was an unnatural, high-pitched wailing, something more animalistic than human. When I stared at him, his skin was red and blistering. What was red turned brown, then black, before he crumbled and nothing but ash was left of him. And in that instant, the paper monster in front of us vanished. The exit opened up, and Johann and I escaped outside, coughing and crying. When we turned back, the entire paper tent was on fire. But then, an innumerable amount of tiny paper planes burst forth from it, and rose high into the sky. Within moments, every hint of what we just witnessed was gone. the tent, the strange paper man, and Martin. As we stood there, watching the last of the tiny paper planes vanish, both Johann and I knew that paper magic was indeed real. Hey everybody, hope you enjoyed today's first of 2 stories. I want to take a quick second to remind you to like, comment, and subscribe on this video. It really helps the channel grow and reach more new people. I was checking recently and saw that around half the people who watch the channel aren't yet subscribed, so I hope you'll take a quick second to hit that button if you haven't yet. Alright, now on to our next story. Sounds can drive you insane. It could be a dripping tap, the neighbor's loud music, or the constant chatter of coworkers. I was never bothered much by these things. I guess it was easy for me to drown them out. Maybe it's because I grew up in an urban area. In my new apartment, things were different. When I had to move because of a new job, I was forced to take the first apartment I could find. It was located in an old 2-story building. It had been advertised as a recently renovated, modern place, but this couldn't have been further from the truth. The place was a relic from the 70s. It was filled with the perpetual odor of old wood, and the musty air inside was almost suffocating. Here and there, the wallpaper faded. The floorboards creaked with each step, and I could have sworn I heard the faint dripping of an old, leaking pipe somewhere deep within the walls. The place's landlord, Mr. Reinhardt, can best be described in 3 words: uptight, stingy, and condescending. As he led me through the place, he went on and on about all sorts of rules. No loud noises after 8. No more than 1 visitor at a time. I could paint the living room, but not the kitchen. And God knows what else. It was an endless list, which he recited in an entirely bored and monotonous voice. The only positive thing was that he didn't mind me bringing my cat, Paws, along. The moment I'd signed the contract, he told me he'd not be around much, if at all. He preferred a pay rent and leave me alone kind of relationship. To say I didn't like him was quite the understatement. He also didn't seem to care about his tenants at all. He didn't even bother telling me how many other people lived there, and I'm not sure even he knew. When I moved in, I saw only 2 other tenants. One was a young man, smoking a cigarette near the building's entrance, greeting me with an overly friendly, overdrawn smile. I gave him a nod, but hurried on, rather unsettled by his smile. The other was Miss Schultz, a friendly older lady living next door. We chit-chatted for a bit. She was such a sweet lady, and I felt bad when I excused myself to finish moving in. The sounds started the first night. They came out of nowhere. I was taking care of a few boxes when sudden sounds made me look up. It was a barely audible humming that reminded me of screeching or wailing, entirely different from the usual sounds of a bustling city. It was an unsettling, almost alien noise that wormed itself deep into my brain. I first thought something was playing on my phone or laptop, but that wasn't it. Then I checked the wall to Miss Schultz's apartment, but everything was quiet. My eyes wandered around the apartment. It was already dark outside, and as the strange hum persisted, I felt goosebumps all over my arms. For the next couple of minutes, I went from room to room, trying to locate the sounds, but then told myself to calm down. There's no such thing as ghosts, I told myself. Right, Paws? The little guy answered me with a happy meow, and rubbed against my ankle. Eventually, I just shrugged it off as something in the house. The place was old. The floorboards were creaking, pipes were leaking, so it was probably one of the boilers. When I heard the sounds more often, though, I got unnerved. I wasn't the only one. Poor Paws was agitated as well. He was scurrying through the apartment in an endless search for their origin. At times, I'd even find him sitting in a corner, simply staring at the walls or the ceiling. It wasn't long before I began doing the same. I checked the whole place, every nook and cranny, but found nothing. When I talked to Miss Schultz, she wasn't much help. She'd heard nothing like it, but said her ears weren't good anymore. Even with her hearing aids, she could barely make out what was on TV. After my talk with her, I decided to check the apartment upstairs. I called myself stupid for not doing so right away. Who knew? It might be the people upstairs causing it. When I arrived at the door, however, the nameplate was gone. I rang the doorbell and knocked a few times, but no one answered. I sighed. I guess I could strike that out as a possibility. Great. On my way back down the stairs, I ran into the same young man I'd seen outside when I first moved in. "Oh, there's no one living there," he said in a friendly voice. "Are you looking for someone?" "Oh, it's nothing," I answered. "But thanks." He nodded. "I'm Mr. Stein," he said, his smile all teeth. Once more, I noticed how overdrawn it was. "I'm Jenny. Nice to meet you," I mumbled, slightly taken aback by his demeanor. He reached out a hand, and when I took it, I couldn't help but squirm a little. This felt less like a handshake, but more like him caressing my hand, testing it. All the while, his disgustingly sweet smile never wavered. "Well, good to know you," I said, freeing my hand, and returning downstairs. Back in my apartment, I had no clue what to do. If those sounds weren't coming from above, I was at my wit's end. The more I suffered through the hum, the more anxious I felt. Sitting alone in the dim light of my laptop, that hum began gnawing at my nerves. At times, I almost jumped up, thinking someone or something was there, like an invisible presence, stalking me unseen. Maybe Mr. Reinhardt knows what's up, I thought, and dialed his number. The moment he picked up, I heard the annoyance in his voice. "Jesus, who the hell's calling me at this hour? It's almost 10. "It's Miss Mann. There are these sounds, this humming, and..." "You're calling me about what now? A sound?" He cut me off. "Last time I was there was no damn sound or anything." "It's not there all the time, only now and then, but I've got no idea where it's coming from or what's causing it. Can't you send someone over, like a maintenance person?" There's always sounds in a building like that. No reason to get so worked up about it. You young people and your... It's not normal. It's like... Whatever it is, I want to hear nothing about it. Especially not at this hour of the night. But it's your building, and I'm free to kick you out whenever I want. That shut me up. I couldn't afford to move again. "See, young lady," he started in his most condescending voice. "This issue's already over." With that, he hung up. That bastard. I cursed before I threw myself back on the couch. Over the next few weeks, I tried my best to ignore the hum, telling myself there had to be a logical explanation. But before long, it was getting to me. One night, while grabbing a glass of water, it scared me so badly I almost dropped it. Going to the bathroom wasn't any better. It felt like the hum started the moment I stepped out of my bedroom, as if some unseen apparition was waiting for me, and coming to get me. The worst were the nights when I lay in bed, awake, dreading, half waiting for the hum's return. Other times, I thought I heard it, only to realize I was imagining things. Whatever sleep I got was plagued by terrible nightmares, and I'd wake up covered in cold sweat, only to be greeted by the now ever-present sound. In one dream, I wandered through a twisted version of my apartment, populated by wailing figures. In another, a giant shade crawled toward me on the ceiling, screeching like broken machinery. At work, I was a mess, and I noticed my boss watching me with concern. I knew I had to move, But no matter how hard I looked, I couldn't find another affordable apartment. I felt trapped. One day, after work, Miss Schultz approached me. The moment she put her hand on my arm, I jerked back, dropping my keys. Jesus Christ, I cursed. But when I saw her next to me, I sighed with relief. I'm so sorry, I apologized. I'm such a mess these days. It's alright, dear. How about some tea? I smiled weakly and was about to decline. But what was I going to do in my apartment anyway? Sit around all day, on edge, waiting for the hum to start again? 5 minutes later, I sat on her couch and told her I thought about moving. Well, dear, I can't blame you. With a place like this, and Mr. Reinhardt as your landlord. If I were younger, I'd find myself a nicer place too. That man's the worst, I said, giving a little laugh. Oh, believe me, he is. You know those renovations back in the day? He made such a fuss about them. I thought he'd modernize the whole place, but you know what he did? A bit of paint here, some new wallpaper there, and a few new tiles in the bathroom. That was it. Oh, and they installed that new exhaust system. I think he was required by law to replace the old ventilation shafts. He'd have never done it otherwise. Wait, Miss Schultz, ventilation shafts? What did they do with them? The old lady looked up at me in surprise. Those old things? They closed them off, and that was it. Knowing Mr. Reinhardt, they probably just put some plaster over the opening. I sat there, wide-eyed. Don't tell me that was where those damn sounds were coming from. What is it, dear? She asked, when she saw me like that. I just remembered something. I gotta go. She nodded and helped me to the door, but was quite surprised at my sudden reaction. Back in my apartment, I had no idea where to look. I didn't know the first thing about ventilation shafts. I walked from room to room, listening intently, but the hum was so low I couldn't pinpoint it. After half an hour, I slumped down on the couch in frustration. By then, it was gone again. Hey, pause. Come here, little guy. He didn't react. Instead, he was sitting in the bathroom, staring at a corner. Then it hit me. Cats have much better ears than humans. Had the little guy figured it out already? A few moments later, I got myself a chair and began checking the bathroom walls. Miss Schultz had said they'd covered the openings with plaster, so I should be able to find them by knocking, right? I didn't know if it was even working. Told myself this was ridiculous. Stupid, even. I knocked against the wall here and there furiously, and suddenly the sound changed. It sounded almost as if the wall was reverberating from inside. That's it. I'd found it. In an instant, I picked up a hammer I'd used to put together my furniture, and went to work. I smashed it against the bathroom tiles with all the strength I could muster, again and again. My arm ached and trembled from the effort. My breath came in short, hard bursts, and sweat was dripping down my face. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Finally, a small hole was revealed. I rushed forward, tearing at the remaining plaster. When I was done, the air was heavy with plaster dust. I stood in front of a small rectangular opening, a shaft stretching upward inside the wall. Yet, wasn't the apartment above empty? What the hell was going on? As if to answer me, the sound started again. But this time, much louder. Paws began meowing right away. As I stood there on the chair, an icy shiver went down my spine. For the first time, I realized what I'd been hearing these past weeks. The cries of a person. I called the cops right away. The moment they heard the sounds, they called for backup, and broke down the door to the apartment above. What they found was pure chaos. The entire place was trashed. Where the kitchen should have been, They found a holding cell. Inside was an older man, chained to the wall and barely alive. As I answered the police's questions, I was a mess. I had so many thoughts on my mind, so many questions. When I mentioned Mr. Stein, the overly friendly young man I'd met, they looked up. They told me the name wasn't on Mr. Reinhardt's list of tenants. After I'd given a detailed description of the man, a few of the other tenants recalled seeing him as well. They too had assumed he was another tenant, but in reality, he must have been a stranger. What makes this whole thing even weirder is that the apartment above was indeed rented. After a checkup, it was revealed that it was under a fake name. Mr. Reinhardt said it had been a middle-aged man who'd signed the contract, but after he was given Mr. Stein's description, he stated it was a different man. Whoever that man was, however, he always paid rent, and always on time, so there was never a need for questions, Mr. Reinhardt said. By now, the police have started a manhunt for Mr. Stein, but the trail has gone cold, and the man has simply vanished. Even now, lying in bed at night, I can't stop thinking about that damn smile, that overdrawn, toothy grin, and the way he'd held onto my hand. He's still out there. Every time I walk past my building, I can't help but glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see him lurking nearby, staring at me, with that same unnerving grin.
Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/JordanGroupHorror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward, and if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.